Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating report from the world of English language teaching. It's the TESOL Research Directions 2023-2027 report.
Yeah, this is a big one. It's produced by the TESOL International Association's Research Professional Council. Basically, think of it as them polling educators across the globe asking, where should we really focus research energy for the next 4 years?
Exactly. So our source stack today is this single, pretty comprehensive document. And our mission, well, it's to explore what these English language educators, the people actually in the classrooms in the field, see as the most vital areas for future research.
Right, and understand the challenges they're really grappling with.
Yeah, and see how these insights are shaping the field, through 2027. We're going to try and pull out the key takeaways from this report so you can quickly get a handle on what really matters in TESOL research right now. Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
So this kind of strategic planning, it's not entirely new for TESOL, is it? The report mentions it builds on previous agendas, like back in 2000, 2004, and 2014.
That's right. It's about keeping their finger on the pulse, really, updating their focus based on where the field is now, not where it was 10 years ago.
And the process for this report sounds like it was, well, pretty extensive. Took 2 full years.
It did, yeah. It started off with a big global survey, summer of 2022, I believe.
They surveyed 639 TESOL members. And what's really striking is, from 90 countries, nearly 65% were actually outside North America. That gives it a proper global view.
Absolutely. And they asked about, the top research topics, the context people are working in, and the challenges they face day to day.
They also got some useful demographic info, didn't they? Like about a third had doctorates.
Nearly half had master's degrees.
Yeah.
And get the 78% had 10 or more years of experience. So we're talking seasoned educators here.
Wow, yeah, lots of experience.
And what they work. 64% were in primary, secondary, or maybe non-degree post-secondary settings. Top roles were language teacher, that was almost half, and teacher educator, around 20%.
That's a really good mix, isn't it? You got the classroom practitioners and the people training them.
Definitely.
So, after that big survey, they did focus groups, right? In summer 2023.
Yep. Brought together 31 educators from 16 countries. And this part was really key for adding sort of the qualitative depth.
So not just numbers, but the stories behind them.
Exactly. The goal wasn't just collecting more data, but to really clarify and interpret what the survey results were showing. They wanted to hear how members saw these different topics, contexts, and challenges all weaving together in their actual work lives.
Right. And it sounds like those discussions were the key to boiling it all down, to reframing the survey stuff into these 4 broad research directions that are the heart of the report.
Absolutely. They saw how the individual points weren't really isolated, but kind of flowed into these bigger themes. And crucially, how these themes look different depending on the specific local context someone was in.
Which led to these 4 areas.
Yeah. And the report lays them out visually quite nicely. Colored bubbles with icons. You've got research education and literacy with a magnifying glass.
Emerging educational technologies, that's the computer monitor one.
Teaching methods has the apple.
And professional learning, the open book. Makes sense.
And what's really important here, I think, is that these aren't just like dry academic categories. The report connects them to a clear vision.
Which is?
It's a vision for an equitable, inclusive, and agentive research community, basically empowering educators. There's a real emphasis on equitable access to research throughout the whole thing.
And that vision includes a pretty broad definition of research itself, doesn't it? It's not just formal studies.
Not at all. It includes educators' everyday routines, observing students, questioning why something works or doesn't, reflecting on their practice. It validates that kind of classroom inquiry as research.
Yeah, I saw that great quote, someone from Saudi Arabia saying, in research, they always say there's a gap, but when I do it in the classroom, there is no gap. We find the solutions.
Perfect, right. It really captures that idea that teachers are constantly solving problems, generating knowledge just by doing their jobs.
Okay, so let's dive into that first direction then. Research, education, and literacy. This feels foundational.
It really does. It covers basically 2 things. Engaging with research, so reading and understanding published work and engaging in research.
Which means actually doing it.
Yeah, implementing ideas, testing things out, maybe running small projects, and definitely that day-to-day observation and reflection cycle we just mentioned.
And the report stresses this isn't just for university folks. There's that quote, research literacy is something for anybody at any level, at any stage of their career.
Right. But making that happen isn't always easy. And this direction connects right back to the biggest challenges people flagged in the survey. What do you reckon was the #1 hurdle?
Based on what you just said. Maybe just knowing how to do research design.
Spot on. Research design was the absolute top challenge. That says a lot, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
not lack of interest, it's the practical know-how.
Yeah, that can definitely feel intimidating. I saw funding and workload were right up there too.
Huge factors. And the report points out how the institutional environment where you work can really limit your ability to even access research, let alone collaborate or share what you find.
The workload thing sounds like a constant refrain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for people juggling multiple jobs or institutions. There was a quote from a pathway program administrator in the U.S. pointing out non-tenure track jobs often have zero research allocation. Makes it really tough.
Wow. So given those big hurdles, design, funding, workload, what specific areas did the focus group say need more research within this whole research ed and literacy bucket?
Well, they really focused on the practical, sometimes kind of messy stuff teachers deal with, like ethical dilemmas was a key one.
Like anticipating problems when you try something new in your own class.
Exactly. Like that participant from Taiwan who talked about trying CLIL, content and language integrated learning, with just some classes and feeling like they were using guinea pigs. That's a really stark way to put it.
It really is. Highlights the sensitivity needed.
And the question came up about needing ethical permission, even just to share or publish that little research, the daily stuff. It suggests we need clearer, maybe more accessible guidelines for teachers doing inquiry in their own rooms.
Right. What about how research is perceived or how it fits into different places?
Yeah, contexts and perceptions, that was another big area. Participants had, different views. One felt research often seems impractical, not really connected to teacher training.
While someone else really valued an output-driven context, focused on actually designing and trying out courses.
Right, so research is needed to kind of bridge that gap, connect the theory to the actual classroom application.
And collaboration came up too.
Definitely. Collaboration across disciplines, across institutions is needed, but it also raised some interesting questions about whether those partnerships are always equitable.
Like, what do K-12 schools really get out of partnering with universities, for instance?
Exactly. But on the flip side, there was real excitement about teachers collaborating with each other on classroom research, like that quote about getting groups of teachers together to make something larger of it.
Or just seeing class time itself as a possibility to do some type of research? That would be very useful to us.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really empowering.
It does. And ultimately, research in this first area matters so much because it helps educators wade through all the information out there, figure out what's actually relevant to them, and feel more confident and equipped to do and share their own classroom research.
Okay, moving on then. The second direction. Emerging educational technologies. This one feels like it's moving so fast, maybe a bit overwhelming sometimes.
It really does, and the report captures that. It frames tech not just as, separate gadgets, but as tools that are everywhere, woven into teaching methods, professional learning.
Like that quote, if they have a cell phone, they're using technology.
Pretty much. And another person said they just couldn't imagine teaching methods anymore without technology of some kind.
The pandemic obviously gave this a huge push. COVID forced so many people online so quickly, often without much prep or resources. That definitely left some gaps.
And that whole experience really brought some key questions to the surface, which the focus groups emphasized. Who actually gets to use these tools? And which ones are really effective for different students, different goals?
That quote comparing a well-resourced center with public schools really hits home on the access issue, doesn't it?
It does. And the worry about how effective are those online lessons for kids in rural areas, that phrase about tech potentially inhabiting pockets of privilege, that feels like a really critical takeaway.
Absolutely. It's not just about having the tech, but who has it and does it actually work well for them?
Right. And this rapid tech adoption also showed up a gap in teacher training. Participants felt that even though tech is everywhere in classrooms, it's not being addressed a lot in teacher development or formal training. Teachers are often left to figure it out themselves.
And then you layer on the newer stuff, AI, AR, ChatGPT. The report notes people see the potential, but there's also, understandably, some apprehension. Feels very current.
For sure. Participants definitely saw ways it could enhance teaching and, interestingly, maybe even lighten teacher workload.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, one person mentioned playing with ChatGPT to get it to plan lessons, and another said AI helps save time, even if the output isn't 100% perfect right away.
Anything that tackles workload is bound to get attention. So research is obviously needed on, well, how tech is being used now.
Right, and how it could be used effectively to boost student learning, like using AI to help students understand things better.
And also really digging into the helpful versus hurtful aspects, depending on the context and what you're trying to achieve. Like that participant said, AI research needs to be across the board.
Exactly. And all this tech makes classroom-based research more feasible too, right? Testing ideas in blended learning, for example. A really important point raised was making it student-centered.
Letting students have a say in what tech works for them.
Yeah, exactly. One participant shared that aha moment. In the moment, I realized it's better for the student to say what will work.
That's great. Putting the learner right at the center, even with tech choices. So research here is vital because it feeds directly into teacher education, professional learning.
Helps educators keep up, basically.
Yeah, and use tech effectively and equitably. Huge challenge.
That's not.
Okay, let's shift to the third direction. Teaching methods. This feels like the absolute bread and butter of language teaching.
It really is core to classroom relationships, activities, and it was high priority in the initial survey.
So even though there's tons of research on methods already, the report argues that because policies change, tech changes, student groups change, we constantly need research on how applicable and effective methods are in today's contexts.
Yes, a strong call to action there. That quote about wanting to switch focus from global best practices to contextual needs really stood out to me.
That feels like a big shift, doesn't it? Away from a one-size-fits-all idea.
Totally. It's about what works here now with these specific students.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at how fast contexts are changing. The report gives some great examples tied to national policies.
Yeah, like Taiwan aiming for Mandarin English bilingual ed, Saudi Arabia's push for English medium instruction, or Thailand where English might be optional.
Right, meaning student motivation or background could be all over the place.
Exactly. And those quotes really show the practical side. Preparing students for EMI in Saudi Arabia needs different methods than, say, trying to anchor students where English isn't compulsory. It's finding the right method for that situation.
And the learners themselves are so diverse. A big need for research on methods for multilingual learners, especially honoring indigenous languages and varieties.
That quote from Cameroon was powerful, needing culturally responsive teaching for students from diverse backgrounds with potentially 500 dialects. Imagine the complexity.
Incredible. And the report also flagged a lack of research specifically on young bilingual learners.
Calls for research on methods for high school and elementary levels, and the unique challenges when English suddenly becomes a priority in, like, kindergarten or first grade.
That must be a whole different ballgame pedagogically.
Absolutely. And another emerging area, sadly driven by world events, is working with refugee and displaced learners. They mention Ukraine specifically.
Right. Needing research on informed pedagogy and social-emotional learning in that specific, often traumatic context.
Crucial work needed there. And again, technology keeps impacting methods, so research is needed on integrating it effectively in student-centered ways.
So the big takeaway for teaching methods is context is king. Research needs to help educators adapt systematically to their specific classrooms and learners, especially as things keep changing so fast.
You got it. Contextualized research is key.
Okay, finally, the fourth direction, professional learning. The report seems to define this pretty broadly, doesn't it? Not just workshops.
It really does. That was a key thing that came out of the focus groups. It goes way beyond just teacher development or in-service. It explicitly includes things like emotional support, mentorship, and teacher well-being.
Wow. Okay. Including emotional support and well-being, that feels really significant. Reflects the pressure on teachers today.
Totally. That quote about peer mentorship, helping teachers stay in the profession because they feel supported, that's powerful stuff.
It really is.
And someone asked that great question. What's missing in our teacher education? About coaching, protecting, creating a safe space for teachers. It points to needing support across their whole career.
And recognizing different needs at different stages, like for beginner teachers.
Exactly. That was specifically called out as needing research attention.
Professional learning also covers adapting to change, like the tech stuff we talked about. And the focus groups thought it was important to broaden the audience for PD.
Yes, beyond just language teachers, because anyone working with multilingual learners, content teachers, administrators, support staff, they all need this knowledge.
Like that example from Taiwan about training English teachers to become bilingual teachers because of the national policy.
Perfect example. And underlying all this is a concern about recruitment and, maybe more importantly, retention, keeping good teachers in the profession. which ties right back to that need for better support.
Makes sense.
So research is needed on things like teacher identity, how it shifts in new roles, social emotional learning for teachers themselves.
It's not just for students.
Right. And understanding what supports are missing in training programs to really sustain educators. That point someone made about doing a lot for student SEL, but maybe not enough for teachers, that really resonated.
That's a critical insight. You need to support the supporters. So the takeaway here is that research into professional learning is vital for informing programs that actually work, that support, train, and keep educators in this really demanding field.
Couldn't agree more. It's about making sure they're equipped for the long haul.
So those are the 4 big directions. The report then wraps up with some concrete recommendations, right? A TESOL's plan for actually acting on this.
Yeah, 5 main points. First, really knowing the audience, focusing on early career researchers, and especially those scholar practitioners, the teachers doing research in their classrooms.
Second, DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Making sure everyone has fair access to research opportunities, mentorship, collaboration. They've already set up a web page with open access resources based on the report, which is a good start.
Third, sustainable evolution. Keeping these directions alive and relevant over time. So collecting data like tracking web page visits and investing in programs like an online mentoring forum or mini grants for teacher research.
Oh, mini grants are great, directly supporting that classroom inquiry. Fourth,
Promoting collaborative research frameworks, encouraging things like action research, lesson study, exploratory practice, and maybe new collaborations like around translanguaging.
okay. And finally,
Communication. Making research accessible, maybe a quick guide to demystify it, and encouraging people to actually talk about these directions online, keep the conversation going.
this report really feels like it lays out a clear path, doesn't it? A vision for TESOL research driven by the people doing the work, deeply rooted in member voices, calling for research that's practical, contextualized, equitable.
Yeah, the 4 directions, research, ed and literacy, ed tech, teaching methods, professional learning, they genuinely reflect the real stuff educators are dealing with globally, and that directly impacts how English gets taught and learned everywhere.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Especially that emphasis on empowering educators to do little r research, just observing, questioning, reflecting daily. It kind of redefines who gets to be a researcher, how knowledge gets made in this field.
It's a really profound idea, actually. What does that perspective mean for how you think about learning and making sense of the world? Not just in teaching, but in any context. Are you maybe doing research in your daily life without even calling it that?